many more of these?
A lot.
I think they get it.
The board.
The boss.
The boss man.
We have a letter for you.
That's got to be a climax then, hasn't it? If you're turning around. We have a letter for you.
Why aren't they coming?
They'll come.
Knock,
knock.
Give it a minute.
But if they don't...
They'll come.
But if they don't...
They will.
It's just that...
What? Just that what?
There's an awful lot of people looking at us.
I think the process began with a conversation with Matt Taunton, your good self, probably a year ago, actually, back in 2023. And I remember you telling me a little bit about your research and how exciting that sounded, and what would it be to cook up this project. And we met with Helen Lindsay, who had kindly provided resource and obviously was a direct link to the extraordinary work of Jack Lindsay.
Well, my father, Jack Lindsay, was a writer, poet, historian, and he wrote something that he called mass declamations, and we've shortened to declamations.
Jack Lindsay began to write mass declamations in the 1930s, along with poets like Randall Swingler. These were very committed left-wing poems designed to include the audience, and which included a lot of choral speaking, people coming together and saying the same words at the same time from a sense of deep shared political commitment. We have some great photographs, for example, of the Bristol Unity Theatre Club performing this mass declamation on Guard for Spain outside. So this was an outdoor performance of a poem which was probably Jack Lindsay's most famous mass declamation, which was written in support of the Spanish Republic.
I was really intrigued by Helen's offer, the idea that she would provide a prize, which is, a wonderful thing in this day and age, that there actually would be some kind of financial support to inspire younger or new writers, contemporary writers, to come up with what we described as a 10-minute political choric piece.
We created this idea of a competition and asked them to work on a political theme that meant something to them, and to consider the idea of a sort of declamatory, poetic structure, but to do it in a way that was relevant to sort of modern sensibilities, if you like, and they've all taken it in radically different ways, and I think that's great that they've sort of made it their own.
Ma 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 ma. Na 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 na. Pa 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 pa. Qua 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 qua. Ra 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 ra.
And I think the next stage in that was thinking, well, who's good at producing this kind of work? And then we naturally thought of the Common Lot, a Norwich resident company who specialise in outdoor work, specialise in work. I've seen several of their shows. What's so exciting about what they do is that they really value the non-professional. They produce theatre that's completely free with an explicitly left-wing ethos.
Well, I was just fascinated when I was approached by Helen to do the project, and I saw some of her father's work, and I thought, well, this is very much like what we do with the Common Lot. We go outdoors, we do things that are out front, we speak about political things, and it just seemed to be right up our street, really. So I sort of felt that it was a sort of a sister project to what we're already about. The actors were going to have a really, really good vocal warm-up. A really good vocal warm-up with Charlie, okay?
I want you to control the volume with your breath, not with your mouth. So I don't want you to go, I want you to make sure it's open and get louder by using that breath. And just really think of that sound projecting out of your body. Think of it projecting out here and in all directions, going out the side, going out your back. So it's just filling all of the space around you.
Declamations, 4 short street shows by the political writers of the future from the script writing course at the UEA.
Free Paula Luca Vega! Drag is not a crime! Drag is not a crime!
That idea of taking inspiration from Jack Lindsay's work, which after all was written for a very different mode of theatre making than the one we're used to today. Having said that, there is a tradition of work that, through Joan Littlewood and other kind of theatre makers, the influence of Brecht, which still keeps alive that idea of something that's more collective, something that's possibly not in a theatrical venue.
Well, the main part I'm playing that I was brought on especially for is the role of the drag artist, as they're named in Can You Forgive Me? And that's been, it was really, I'm very grateful that I was brought on to do that, because people someone just looked at me and was just like, yep, let's drag Jesus. But yeah, it's really good to work on that. I think that's another one of those pieces where the choral voice is so strong, and like, I have the monologue, but I don't have that many lines, but having everything around me, I found it really easy to sort of act against things going on around me, because it's such a strong voice. You feel it in you. So in some ways I've not found it hard to be like, I have to contrive this emotion.
My body is God's temple. I will respect it at all times.
Again?
My body is God's temple. I will respect it at all times. My body is God's temple. I will respect it at all times. My body is God's temple. I will respect it at all times. My body is God's temple. I will respect it at all times. Again.
What I think's been very, very has come across quite strongly to me is that people have actually cared about what they're saying, and have been involved with the characters in a way that I think has actually made a difference to the way in which they've played them.
Drag is not a crime! 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 Drag is not a crime!
I suppose social media, in a kind of metaphorical way, is a bunch of people shouting at each other, and the right has always been about harnessing anger. It's somewhat true of the left as well. When you actually talk about revolutions, it's sort of easier to be angry than anything else. There's this thing where we're saying, do you see him, in this accusatory way in that piece, and it's quite easy to be shouty and accusatory in unison, and then we're meant to say, do you see them, and respect their preferred pronoun, and say it with empathy, which is actually harder to achieve in unison.
Most of the theatre I do now is with the Common Lot, and the Common Lot is always outdoors. It's always political, but lightly political. It's not something shoved down your throat. It's right, here are the facts, you make your own decision. And I think that these shows kind of have that same feeling to them, and there's nobody's going to go away particularly offended. Maybe the Drag Jesus one is the most risky. 99% of the audience will absolutely love it, and if we're unlucky there might be someone who doesn't and might say something, but that's live theatre for you, and I kind of like living that risk a little bit.
God in your body, bear the cross in your heart. Even when it's torn and bloody, bear the cross in your heart.
It's documentary theatre, you know, it's theatre that sort of like, it tells people of something that's important that they need to be aware of or they need to know, and it's finding ways to express those things in collective ways, which gives it sort of additional strength.
We've arrived! Knock, knock! Who's there?
What?
No!
It's not a joke.
Try again! Knock,
Knock,
knock!
knock.
Who's there?
No!
We have a bone to pick with you!
We have a letter to deliver to you.
Knock, knock!
The boss! We want to deliver it straight to the boss.
Yes!
Not to the workers.
No!
To the workers.
We understand.
You have children. Bills.
Rent! I think they get it.
The board.
The boss! Boss man!
We have a letter
For you! That's a blood and oil!
You know, there's not much subtlety in outdoor theatre. You know, if you really want to get something over the bar, you can't be too subtle. You have to be sort of fairly declamatory anyway. But I think the main thing about doing outdoor theatre is people can come and go. They can, you know, bring a picnic. They can bring their kids. The kids can run around, and you know, they don't have to sort of like abide by the etiquette of normal theatre. You can also create, you know, a theatre in any space, in a park, in a field, in a city centre. You don't have to abide by the rules of theatre, which is something I like about it. I think it's slightly more anarchic and sort of free than indoor theatre.
And in this building, lonely people gathered, worshipped numbers, worshipped money, bowed to the gods of exponential growth, embodied the goddess of destruction. And from this building, they summoned toxic fumes from the underworld, called on floods and fires and famines and sent them to lands far away, made sacrifices on burning piles of coal. In short, chaos arrived in her chariot of fire. And from this building, they slashed open the belly of the earth. Black blood spilt forth. They reached their hands into soft, warm darkness. And from the stinking innards pulled out private jets and second homes.
It's interesting to me that sometimes the first time that they read out a piece of choral speech, it'll sound quite... yeah.
There you go, you see, that's outdoor theatre.
Yeah.
That's what you get. You get these kind of distractions. You have to work against them all the time. You never know what's coming. So you have to be ready to work against that. We got attacked by a load of cockchafers once when we were doing an outdoor show. You know, these great big buzzing things that just hit you in the face. We had a hurricane whip up when we was at the Whiffler Theatre once. You know, all sorts of things happen. You know, racists start shouting at you. You know, but I like all that. I think jeopardy is partly the joy of doing outdoor theatre. You know, it's the potential jeopardy of something that makes it feel more alive. You know.
Just the cacophony of all the animal voices, that's it might not come across just how complicated that was, but it's almost like real sort of vocal choreography, and that's been really interesting, something I've never ever done before.
Old Crow! Great Crow! Where is Crow? Old Crow! Great Crow!
Where is Crow? Birds, beasts, fish, insects, I call this Congress to attention!
I have to admit, I'm personally a bit of a contrarian, and I quite enjoy playing an oddball or someone who's going against that. And I suppose sometimes if you are in a chorus, you feel like, it's slightly more redundant. You're saying what everyone else is saying anyway, and you have to rehearse a lot to genuinely be in unison. And by the time you have, some of the nuances sometimes departed.
It is potentially embarrassing and it is potentially reductive, and I think we have to acknowledge all those things, and they may be part of what people experience when they hear the pieces in the streets of Norwich on Saturday. But I think it's really interesting to work out why that is so. Actually, naturalism itself is a sort of deviation, you could argue, a brief interval in the history of theatre where, just because of the nature of the building and everything, let's try and pretend the audience is not present. Whereas actually, I think all theatre at its core is a storytelling medium. Now, whether that doesn't necessarily mean that people have to speak at the same time. Even when we look at the Greek chorus, it's not even that clear to us what was said in unison, what was said in canon, what was said, sort of a tag relay. I think the notion of the chorus is really complicated, and I think it was presenting lots of really interesting theatrical options, but what it was particularly doing was saying there's a version of storytelling and social being that's not strictly about the individual.
This is our message, dear humans, for you to carry. Time is not on our side.
And I think if you get that out of any form of storytelling, if you just cut that out, you end up with people trapped in a room, which I think has always been the kind of frustration of naturalist drama, that it just seems to just describe the collapse of situations without any notion of hope or wider context. Whereas I think theatre before had mechanisms to sort of say this is not the whole story, that the story is happening here and also elsewhere at the same time.
This meeting is pointless. I'm getting hungry, and Dormouse has never looked so tasty.
Remember our agreement.
Is something pressing on you? Do you sleep well?
Is something filling you up, filling you full of concrete while you sleep?
How would you describe your general moods?
You're standing on a wasteland. That's not some kind of a metaphor. Stand.
I became interested in Argyle Street because some of the people I've been organising within Norwich have been involved with it, and my friend has got a bit of a psychogeography project called Norwich Remapped. I'd made a film that has it in. And I sort of thought, well, it's a really good opportunity to do some sort of oral history drama, and it might really suit this form that's about voices speaking together. And this is the site of the squat. It got knocked down, and they rebuilt some of it and just left this.
The People's Republic of Argyle Street! One of the largest squats in Europe for a time.
We very nearly on this street.
And also it's quite scary because you're using people's real voices and you're on the site. It feels like there's a lot of history going on that you want to do justice to, but it's been really moving, I thought, and I found it really powerful. But that's Norwich City scoring final game of the season.
The police come down here to arrest somebody. Argyle Street people being Argyle Street people.
We sit in the road!
Won't let the cars down.
One of the policemen, he says to me,
Get out the bloody road!
I won't. So he cracks my cheekbone. Eamon finds out about it. He gets his axe. He goes down to the police station. He starts smashing every single police car windscreen in Bethel Street. He walks into the station, plonks his axe on the counter and said, "That's for attacking the people of Argyle Street." It can get a little Wild West.
I moved to Norwich when Argyle Street was being set up, and I wasn't in Argyle Street, but I was part of that same sort of community. I lived in a commune in North Norfolk. Fun fact is my dad carried on living in communes after my mum and dad split up, and I'm actually using his rucksack that he went from commune to commune with and did a lot of walking with, so I'm using that in the show as a little nod to him.
my spirit, oh clouds unfold. Bring me my chariot of fire.
I think the difference between us and the time of Jack Lindsay is there isn't that confident sense of I want to speak for others. I think, which is good, you know, I mean, in some respects our students are great democrats and they, you know, they're, who am I to speak for others? And I think they find it a bit crass and a bit difficult to speak in their own voice in a collective way. So I think there's actually less of that in these texts than you might assume. But on the other hand, our constant refrain has been it's outdoor theatre, you've got to be clear.
We're all pretty much in unison when we're singing Jerusalem in one of the pieces. I mean, maybe that's what music is. It's like voices corralled into unison by some kind of external structure.
Building here among those dark satanic hills. Bring me my voice.
Bring me
All the people I work with.